I practice law every day. And the relationship between law enforcement and prosecutors is incestuous because every prosecutor relies on law enforcement to make their cases. And so it's kind of hard for you to then go in the family and ask that same prosecutor to prosecute somebody who's been helping them make cases.
You have a new police misconduct division of the Department of Justice that's dedicated just to answering complaints and investigating police misconduct. The independent investigators would be a game changer, because if you're a citizen, you call the feds, and the feds' job is actually to respond to you. It's not like to try and bury your complaint under a rug. Very happy to welcome to Yang Speaks, South Carolina leader, son and nephew of civil rights icons, commentator on what's happening right now and really for the last number of decades in American life where race is concerned, but also now a newly minted author. Just wrote a book, My Vanishing Country, which I've read and enjoyed a great deal. And it gives you a sense of the historical arc of many of the things we're facing as a country today. Mr. Bakari Sellers, welcome, Bakari.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. I've always admired you. I love the work that you're doing. Your race for president of the United States, your campaign invigorated and brought more people into the process. And now I get to call you a coworker and a colleague. And it's just your voice is refreshing. And so thank you for everything. And thank you for welcoming me to the Yang Gang.
Well, thrilled to have you here, Bakari. You know, I mean, you're such an important figure. I saw your emotional reaction on TV about George Floyd and what's happened. And you have one boy and one girl. Is that right? I know they're twins.
I have twins. I have one boy, one girl, and I have a 15-year-old. And so, you know, when I think back on that moment, Andrew, it for me, I was coming on, and you know how this goes sometimes. I was coming on TV after George Floyd's brother, and he was really emotional. And, you know, I was just thinking about the fact that he lay dead in the street. I was thinking about the fact that the officer had his knee on his neck for 8 minutes, three of which he was already dead. Didn't give him the benefit of his humanity. And I began to think, what would I tell my children? How was I going to raise my children in a world where there is a segment of the population that does not give them the benefit of their humanity? And for me, it was that level of disrespect that they showed George. But it's over and over again. You know, my father's generation was Emmett Till, Jimmy Lee Jackson, Medgar Evers, the four little girls in the 16th Street Baptist Church. And then for me, it's not only my good friend Clem in the Charleston Massacre, which I write about, but it's also George, Ahmaud, Breonna, Trayvon, Eric, Alton, Walter, Keith, Tamir, Sandra. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I think right now people have to realize in this moment, we're having a moment that's not just about George Floyd, but it's also about years and decades and centuries of systemic racism and institutionalized oppression.
You know, we have a crisis that's on top of a crisis on top of decades and decades of structural racism. And the fact that you've obviously internalized each victim that we know about. And we all know that for every victim you just listed, there must be dozens, hundreds of others that we'll never hear about.
Correct.
That just no one had a smartphone handy or the narrative never reached the public eye. One of the things that I found most difficult to stomach when I was looking into these issues when I was running for president, because there was a huge need for criminal justice reform and addressing police brutality before this crisis. We don't even know how many people are shot and killed by police officers every year or die in police custody.
Yeah. And one of the things I think about is going back to you all's campaign. Julian Castro actually got this right. Julian was he had one of the more bold visions on this. But there are things we can do, Andrew. And that's what, I don't like the people who are telling us to just go and wait to vote in November. I just, that doesn't do us any good, because at the rate they're killing black folk, that's going to be about another 5, 6, 7 bodies between now and November. But I want people to talk about limiting qualified immunity in civil suits that we bring against bad police officers and bad police departments. I want people to talk about lowering the standard by which you can bring federal criminal civil rights charges against law enforcement officers. I want a national standardized use of force guidelines and training. I want a national database, because right now you can be a bad cop in one city and go two cities down and get another job. I want the officers arrested in George Floyd's case. So, these are things that we can talk about doing now, structural change and reform in the way that we police right now. But we seem to be absent leadership. And, as Democrats, sometimes I say that we legislate with a stop sign. Like we never go big enough. We never go bold enough. We never go creative enough. We never go progressive enough. And I think that this is the time in which we have to do that.
I could not agree more. I think being told it's like, hey, wait for 5 months and like head to the ballot box. There's so much urgency and energy and passion and grief and despair. And I understand people looking up and saying shit has not been working for us for years, decades. Like, why would we expect it to change with any one election? So, but let's go through those measures one by one, because I think they're so important.
Sure.
So when I looked at this again, like with you, number one, I'm like a data guy. So the first thing I think is like, okay, like how many people does this kill every year? And then when you can't find that out, then you're like, oh shit, like that's really, that's like very, very damning. Because like there's a police department where, someone shoots an unarmed black man in the dead of night, and you're just like, oh, well, let's just like say that the person attacked, fled, was armed, like
the officers would just say they were scared. The wild thing is that this officer Chauvin had 18 complaints against him. Now I know some people just file frivolous complaints sometimes, but 18 is a whole lot. Or in the case of David McAtee, one of the cases that we're seeing now out of Louisville, they called him the barbecue man. And he literally in his barbecue restaurant fed cops for free. So imagine you feed cops for free and are now gunned down by cops. And you talk about the evidence or lack thereof. When you're talking about data, well, their body cam footage wasn't on. So, how do we even figure out what happened? So you have these things. And like you said, we can start with the data. I think that's important. And from that data, we can mine other good ideas. But I do think that there has to be some standardized, some nationalized things that we do, starting with data, of course, but also starting with the use of force and making sure that, for example, chokeholds aren't allowed in one district and department, but allowed in another.
I met with Black Lives Matter activist in New York, Hawk Newsom, who said to me, look, here's the problem. And this struck me as true. He said, so let's say you have a dirty cop, does something terrible in an area. The local district attorneys literally work with law enforcement day in, day out. And if you're the mayor of that town, law enforcement's possibly the most important constituency you have, where if they turn on you, you're fucked. And so you're looking at it and saying, okay, let's see, the DA, the mayor, like no one has a real interest in trying to root out like bad cops or confront them on brutal behavior. And so what Hawk said to me was like, you need someone from outside of that area. And Kamala said this yesterday, too, something similar. She said it needs to be like the state attorney general, which strikes me as still too close to the area. Because if you're like, the state AG still probably knows a lot of the same people.
So what I would say is I practice law every day, and I'm a criminal lawyer. I do it all. The only things I don't do are immigration and family law. And the relationship between law enforcement and prosecutors is incestuous because every prosecutor relies on law enforcement to make their cases. And so it's kind of hard for you to then go in the family and ask that same prosecutor to prosecute somebody who's been helping them make cases for the past, decade plus. And so you need those outside independent investigators to come in and handle these cases, outside independent prosecutors to handle these cases. I think it's going to be very interesting with Keith Ellison handling this case as the Attorney General in Minnesota. That's going to be very interesting. But nationwide, we have to see independent investigators of law enforcement shootings. And it's no excuse to have your body camera not on. It's no excuse that we don't have use of force training and de-escalation training and manuals around that we can actually pick up and see, because it's not only the data, but it's the lack of transparency. Let me put it to you this way. Breonna Taylor and George Floyd funded the departments that killed them. And what I mean by that is our tax dollars go to the Department of Justice, who issues grants to these departments. We don't have any clawback mechanisms, but these departments have no transparency, have no civilian oversight. We don't know their training mechanisms, but yet our tax dollars go to them. And so I think that I'm not saying defund, but what I am saying is that we need to have some accountability measures in place with our tax dollars that go to these police departments.
So this is my proposal that I put out on social media, and some people loved it. I actually got much more love than anything else. So if you take as a given that local district attorneys and officials are going to have a hard time confronting police misconduct in their area because of the incestuous relationships that you just described, and you need someone independent. Now I looked at the Department of Justice guidelines, and after the Rodney King riots, they passed a law saying that the Department of Justice can investigate police departments for systemic problems, as they did with the LAPD.
Correct. Patterns
of practice, and it violating constitutional rights and equal rights. That happens very, very seldom. It's happened, I believe, once in the entire Trump administration, and it strikes me as woefully insufficient. So the proposal is that you have a new police misconduct division of the Department of Justice that's dedicated just to answering complaints and investigating police misconduct. If you were a really good DA or mayor, you actually welcome this because you're like, oh, good. Like, I didn't want to have to pick a fight with like the local law enforcement, but the feds are here. You name it after George Floyd, you fund it. And then you have an army of investigators who are just following up to see, like, it's like, hey, there are a lot of complaints against this Derek Chauvin character, like 18 of them, it's like, or you're coming in hopefully before the fact. You're completely immune from political influence. Your job is just to try and root out bad cops. I suggested that Val Demings run it, someone that people would be excited about because she has a law enforcement background, and then most people saw this proposal and said, like, yes, that this could be he could be onto something here. Other people took the like, no, we should defund, essentially, like what your original, which, like, I looked at it and say, look, there are 18,000 police departments around the country getting funded in all sorts of ways by like municipalities and property tax. Correct. And the rest of it. It's like I understand the impulse, but to me, it's much more practical to actually bring up someone who's like an independent actor who doesn't have ties to the community. Their entire measurements are just around trying to root out police misconduct. And then you could also get better data because you'd have a department that's dedicated to it.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, there are a few things. One, patterns and practice investigations in law enforcement literally take about the entire presidency before they're completed, before you can actually issue a consent order or something of that nature. They take forever. They're too long. And as you said, they're woefully inadequate. But not only should cities and local elected officials welcome it, but good cops should welcome it too, because you're shining some light in and you don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about what's going on and who's protecting you and who you're serving with because you're a good cop. But you do know that there are others there who are reviewing these things. And I think Val Demings is so dope. I love Val Demings. I mean, she's been an absolute superstar. You never know. I think she might have some other things.
Yeah, I know. Someone responded to it being like, well, she's not vice president. Maybe she can run the George Floyd police misconduct division.
But having this independent arbiter of misconduct, I think is very, very valid, and it speeds up justice. I mean, we're sitting here today and, the officers still have not been arrested, and hopefully that changes. We're not sure. I agree with Rand Paul weirdly enough about no-knock warrants in Louisville in the case of Breonna Taylor. They just released her boyfriend who shot back. I mean, he did something that most people would do.
If people kick down the door of your house with guns out, you might,
You wake up startled, you're going to shoot back, and so they drop the charges. But we just have so many reforms that, I think that you would agree with me that this passive attitude that even some Democrats are taking now, where you're like, we're asking for peace, but we're not asking for justice. And we're telling people to go home without anything to do or without any strategy or without any aspirations or goals, I think is a
mistake. I agree, man. I'm not doing that because I understand the anger. It's like, and people have been rightfully pointing out, it's like this shit has been going on under Democrats and Republicans under like different administrations. Right. And it's not like, if you just win an election, like all of a sudden black people are safe in their neighborhoods. I mean, we all know it's just not true.
Well, this discussion is refreshing because it's one that it abides by the policy guidelines that I set forth in my head. And that's when I put my legislative hat back on, which is, I am tired of Democrats and Republicans just proposing these race neutral policies for very race specific problems we have. Right. I'm not a big believer in rising tide lifts all boats. I do think that we have to have, and you talk about this as well, when it comes to capital and directing resources directly.
Yeah, sure. Get some freaking money to people's hands like that. That would help too. I mean, George Floyd died because he was like allegedly, using like a counterfeit $20 bill. I mean, is that the situation if he got $2,000 a month in relief, let's say forever, hypothetically,
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that we have to, I've come around on UBI. I don't think it can supplant or supplant some of the safety net programs we have right now. I don't think it has to. But I do believe that what we've exposed, and one of the things I talk about in my book is, for me, it's not about somebody calling me nigger.
Which is one thing I really appreciate about your book, by the way, because you're like, I get called like that all the time, but like if that freaking like what was the issue? Like I'd never be able to do anything.
Exactly. But Stokely pointed out, I always refer to Stokely's uncle. Stokely would always say that, we have to define racism, and racism is if you want to lynch me, that's your problem. But if you have the power to lynch me, that's my problem. Right. And so it's a power construct, and it's about systems. Right. It's about systems and institutionalized racism. And so one of the things that I've always talked about is the fact that if you take this pandemic, if you want to peel the layers back, you would appreciate this because now we have data. We have data that shows us that Black people are dying disproportionately, and Native Americans. And the question is why? And I go back and I'm like, it's not just, get more vitamin D, stop drinking and stop smoking. It's the fact that, as I outlined in My Vanishing Country, like, you grow up in a food desert where you can't have healthy food alternatives. You're drinking dirty water. You're breathing in polluted air. You live next to a brownfield or a manufacturing plant. You're going to schools that are broken down. I mean, all of these things contribute to the comorbidities, contribute to the preventable diseases. And then you overlay a pandemic. I mean, hell, like, the saying, when America gets a cold, black folk get the flu. Well, now America has COVID and black folk are dying. And that is the reason why, because of these systemic injustices we have in this country. And so right now, racism and those systemic racism is killing people two ways, through COVID and, on the streets at the hands of law enforcement. And, we haven't really addressed that. And one of the ways that, we've peeled the layer back when we look at the data, I think that, when you talk about a UBI, that is one way that's one way in which we can help improve some of these systems and improve the culture in many of these communities.
To me, Bakari, and I said this on the trail, words hurt, numbers kill. If you have systemic poverty and people have high blood pressure and all these, diabetes and all these health problems because they live in a food desert. They're food insecure. They don't know where their next rent check or paycheck's going to come from. That's also very, very stressful. You have like elevated mental health problems and anxiety and everything else. That like the numbers are the thing that we can actually address. If we all get together as a country and say, hey, guess what? We're tired of people being poor, $2,000 a month. And this is what Martin Luther King was fighting for when he was killed. And, to me, his memory has just been sanitized. You have this like celebrate his birthday. Like, I have a dream. And it's like, you don't see every freaking year. It's like universal basic income. Let's like just give everyone.
I talk about that in the book too. I remind people often that the last Gallup poll they did of King, I think it was 64, but it might have been 66. I think it was 64. His approval rating was in the low 30s, and Donald Trump's approval rating stays between 40 and 48. So when people oftentimes bring up Dr. King, I'm like, you do remember that, not only did you kill him, but he really wasn't well liked when he died, because he was a revolutionary and he's been whitewashed. And many other things, I mean, people don't even understand how he died, why he died, and how he was fighting for the rights of sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah, he was fighting for UBI. He was fighting for improved worker conditions and just improving the plight and the load of everyday people of color and everyday working people. Which we have to, one of the things we have to do, one of the reasons I wrote this book is because we have to flip the narrative on its head that working class means white and rural means white and urban means black. Like we have to kind of disavow ourselves and disabuse ourselves of those notions. But yes, you're right. Dr. King was a revolutionary whose legacy has been whitewashed.
There's so many arresting or like affecting stories from your book. I mean, certainly your father's story. I mean, I feel like he was very lucky to be alive. Like it's clear that
yes.
That some people intended him harm, and 3 other people lost their lives. The Orangeburg massacre, which I agree with you, also is very much overlooked in history. And I can't imagine what it's like to have that be your family's lineage, like your family's history. There's also the story of your friend Pop from childhood, who just seemed like, just instinctively, I just really liked him. He just seemed like such a great guy. He went to college, tried to better himself, became a parent, but still struggled mightily. And that hurt because, there's this myth of the American dream where if you try and do the right things, like you'll end up being able to live a decent life. And for many, many people, including many of the people you grew up with, it's not true.
My story of Pop, first of all, you never really realize how many characters are in your life until you begin to write about them. I mean, when you write, I can't wait to read your next book, Andrew, but when you write about it, all these characters you meet and that play a role in your life, and you give them life in their own right and give them a voice, you're like, wow, these people are really, my friends are really complex. But Pop is a story of love, challenge, conflict. But if Pop's a member of the Yang Gang or he takes a minute to listen to this pod, I want Pop to know that he's a success, because his struggle, his toils, his tribulations, him trying to get over the hump, him trying to attain that American dream is going to create more opportunity for his children. And they won't have to go through many of the same things that Pop did. Pop will always be my brother. We were raised together, different sides of the track, different households. I write vividly about when Pop lost his father and how he ended up coming over to our house and living with us, and him being mad he wasn't invited to the wedding, and just all of these things, these complicated relationships. But Pop is a part of an America that people don't want to see and don't want to talk about. And
it's one reason why your book's so important. We have to let people know that, this is the new normal, or the old normal, the same normal in America, and that we need to do something about it. So it sounds like we have agreed on two big things so far. We need a new police misconduct team of investigators that are immune from local influence, and it sounds like we both want to get rid of poverty. Think like that would help, which I believe that would help.
What do you think about this idea? I've been thinking about this in my head. I want to push this country to create a new infrastructure package. I think it's bipartisan, and along the same lines of my race-specific policy proposals. I want this infrastructure to be in a few buckets. Innovative, cutting-edge technologies like high-speed railways between major cities, especially throughout the South, like Charlotte, Atlanta, and those type things. But I also want to have broadband involved in it. I want basic utilities like water involved in it, because we still have dirty water in Flint, Michigan, and Denmark, yes, South Carolina, which is a travesty. I want to say that we set aside $2 trillion or $5 trillion, and of those monies, 10% has to go to minority-owned businesses, right? And of the other remaining 90%, they have to have a minority hiring component. Think about how that impacts an economy. Think about how that lifts up minority businesses. Think about how that gives people jobs, high paying jobs. And because we'll have to cultivate and create a new workforce, think about those businesses who will then partner with places like HBCUs or other technical colleges to help cultivate and build an entire new labor force. I just think that if we focus on something like our country's infrastructure to rebuild it, I think that we can actually create an entire new generation of wealth.
Everyone should be able to get behind this. I can't believe Trump didn't even build anything. I thought that this would be his jam just so he could throw his name on it. But yeah. I mean,
he's a horrible builder too, apparently. But whatever.
But trillions of dollars in infrastructure, for everything from clean water to broadband in rural communities to 5G, high speed rail. I mean, the reality is our country's falling apart. Like we're still literally falling apart. It's unsafe. We are coasting on investments that were made decades ago, and now it's time to reinvest. It's past time, and this used to be bipartisan. It's a symptom of just how dysfunctional things have gotten, and it would potentially rejuvenate Black communities and communities around the country, because to your point, let's say 10% of $2 trillion would be like $200 billion that went straight into minority-owned businesses and communities.
I just think about the ripple effect. I mean, these people, you're gonna be working. You're gonna be it's gonna take engineers. These are high-paying jobs, etc. These companies are gonna have to invest in STEM programs in local communities to help build pipelines. And these are, as you know, these projects take years, if not decades, to complete. So you're talking about a constant stream of a return, a ROI. I mean, these are your words and phrases. I mean,
I visited family in Asia, and there's a high-speed rail that goes the equivalent from New York to DC in like 75, 80 minutes, like what would be like a 4-hour drive, like an hour and 20-minute train ride, high-speed rail. And it warps your sense of the laws of time and space. And it also gave rise to whole new communities that were, let's call it, like 60 miles away from downtown, but all of a sudden that's like a 35-minute train ride. So then they just built it up because it's like, so it, so that's like a whole new town. So those are the possibilities.
Right, so we added a third. We added a third thing. We're at infrastructure too. So I mean, we're rocking it. We're fixing all the world's problems. We did policing, we did poverty, and now we're on
let's
infrastructure.
Come back to policing because there's some other like things that need to be done after even you have. I think the independent investigators would be a game changer because if you're a citizen, you call the feds, and the feds' job is actually to respond to you. It's not like to try and bury your complaint under a rug. So so I just want to unpack this a little bit more because I dug into some of the numbers. Right now, communities are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on payouts for victims of police brutality. Like, it's a massive line item in their budgets.
Correct. In North Charleston, they paid out $6.5 million for the murder of Walter Scott out of their just city budget. And if you weren't killing and shooting people in the back, maybe you could use that for, I don't know, summer programs, summer job programs,
schools, repair a school, like
healthcare,
whatever
schools.
It is. And as we're talking about human life, but the fact is, like, police brutality is very, very costly. There's like New York City spent $300 million on payouts in a year.
300
million in a year. And that's independent of the actual like lawyers' fees, because that wasn't included, like or insurance, because like I'm sure they had they pay for that too. So you're talking about nationwide hundreds of millions of dollars that are getting spent essentially cleaning up
billions
after dirty cops, and that money could be better spent. It's also a sign of how big the problem is, because only a fraction of these lawsuits are ever seeing the light of day. Like the vast majority just get,
Correct.
It's like, or not even settled. It's like, like fucking shot that guy. Like, he scared me. Like, like that.
That is also
yeah. It's
very
like the
true.
vast majority of the time it's not like a lawsuit's being brought. So if you see that the successful lawsuits are resulting in hundreds of millions of dollars in liability, in some cases, towns had to cut back on other services because they were stuck with some freaking giant
And you just think about if we invested 10% of that on the front end,
yes,
and trained.
So that's where we have to go. We have to take this feedback loop,
or even paid them more. Like, I'm not opposed to paying good cops more.
So here was an idea I had, Bakari. I hope you like it. Sounds like you're going to like it. So what you do is you have department-wide bonuses tied to lower police brutality liability in a given.
So it's an okay idea, but you mean like an all-state drive safe, you get a check
so
thing?
Here's the thing. It's like if you're part of like the NYPD and you're paying $300 million out and penalties, then you go to the members of the police department and be like, hey, FYI, if you get that down, we'll actually distribute 10% of the reduction to officers. So each of you can get a few $100s at the end of the year if you guys get the liability down. And then some asshole does something and you're just like, oh fuck, man, that actually cost me money.
I mean, I don't like incentivizing people to be anti-racist. However, because the problem is so exacerbated, I don't think that's a bad idea. And I think that what it does is it helps. What you're doing with that is you're changing culture, because now it's like everybody at home now. And then you see these fools out just walking around with no mask on, and you feel like you're a kindergarten class that can't get recess because of two people. And so you change the culture. You start having people in law enforcement. They're like, dude, let's not shoot the guy in the back. Right. You don't have to beat him. Right. We can get this extra few dollars. And I think that it would actually build some level of camaraderie.
Certainly camaraderie around good cops. Because if you're a good cop, then you're like, hey, another study I saw, I'm obviously been digging into this, but bad cops are incredibly expensive. It's like that when you looked at it, a bad cop generates lawsuits, but more, they increase your insurance premiums. There are all these problems with a bad cop. So if you had measurements around a police department, essentially incurring lower liabilities. But I 100% agree with you, though. It's all about the culture, because right now the culture is it's us against them, with us defined as law enforcement. Exactly. And them defined as everyone else.
Correct. Exactly. But that's so American, because right now we're at a point where I can't even say Black Lives Matter. I mean, have you seen the Michael
I just
Che
retweeted
routine?
it just because it was so relevant and awesome and brilliant.
Yeah, it's so relevant. Like, we can't even agree on that. Like, we're just saying it matters, right? We're not saying it matters more than anything else. We're just asking for like it to matter. And so one of the ways you were able to break through in your race, and one of the things we have to duplicate, though, is bringing new people into this process and creating a level of understanding. You know, the biggest problem we have in this country is we're absent empathy. I just don't think that people have the want to put themselves in other people's shoes. I mean, I tell people all the time, if you read My Vanishing Country, I want you to be able to have a level of understanding and at least just have some empathy for your fellow man and understanding what it means to be Black in this country. You know, T.D. Jakes told me something so poignant. He said, look, and you would agree with this. He said, you could teach me math, you can teach me science, you can teach me English, but you can't teach me Blackness. And until we start to get understanding of other people's cultures, then we'll never get to the level of empathy that actually gets us to a point where we can begin to heal. And we need to see that in all of our systems. I mean, we need to see that not only in our policing, we need to see that level of empathy in our infrastructure, because you don't want your daughter or son or whomever drinking dirty water. Well, so why should I? You want to talk about it in our educational system, because of the fact that kids are punished because of the zip codes they're born into today. You've come to South Carolina. You know about the corridor of shame, where kids go to school and their heating and area doesn't work and their infrastructure is falling apart. And so we have to be focused on remedying these.
You talk about in your book, man, like the empathy of like our healthcare system, where they just don't listen to Black women. Like Black women like say, hey, I'm in pain, or this is wrong with me. And then
I've seen the brokenness of our healthcare system from three angles. Like, one, living in a community where we lost our hospital. When you don't expand Medicaid, that shit happens. And people don't even know the economic impact of losing a hospital. It's not just a healthcare impact, but it's an economic impact, because you know what happens when you lose your hospital in small towns and small communities? That's usually your number one employer. So people are unemployed. And not only that, but all the small businesses around it, the florist shops, the pharmacies, the restaurants that all spring off because of the hospital, that whole part of town just shuts down. So I lost my hospital, almost lost my wife in birth of our child last year. We talked about African-American female mortality. She hemorrhaged while giving birth to my twins. Thank God. I mean, I don't know. And
it sounds like you were a key part of the reason why she survived, because you raised the alarm.
You have to become an advocate. You got to become a champion. And for the first 36 hours of their life, she was in ICU. So I saw it through not only losing access to care, but also African-American female mortality. And the third thing is, my daughter last year had to have a liver transplant. And, you know, I was able to see up close and personal a very broken transplant system that we have in this country, where less than 5% of donors are African-American, but we need more because of these preventable and comorbidities that we talked about. We need more access to organs. And so just from those three perspectives, I have a very interesting but yet personal look on how we have to make sure that everyone has access to the promises and ideals of this country that I say and believe are vanishing, although I believe we can reclaim it. Right now, it's vanishing before our eyes.
Yes. Well, if there's anyone who's going to help us reclaim it, it's you and yours, Bakari. So you talked about national training for police officers, which I also completely agree with. My sense right now is that there's like a, whole range of different training approaches, but most all of them seem to center on shooting to kill relatively quickly, like making snap decisions. And we need to have some national training protocols. And so I talked to someone who's in policing, and he suggested that we need more intermediate weapons as a way to de-escalate, like, because right now it seems like it's gun or nothing. And he was like, look, like, yes, you theoretically have some other things, but like we need to like make it so that shooting with a lethal firearm is not your first move.
I mean, I also think that and this is going to be somewhat sensationalized and a little bit controversial, but if you're inherently afraid of black people, like, you don't need to be on a law enforcement force. Like, if that's your fear, if you were just scared, right, you're always scared, that's not something you should do. But I think that there are a number of mechanisms and ways and methods, because we see it done with other people often, of de-escalating very, very tense situations that don't involve they rode up on Tamir Rice and shot him in like 2 seconds, playing with a toy gun that anybody who, would have been able to see it. I mean, it's a 12-year-old kid. He was a boy. He was in a park playing with a toy gun by himself. And they rode up on him and shot him. I mean, the chokehold that was used against Eric Gardner, and the standard is so high that Barack Obama's Department of Justice wasn't even able to bring charges against Penalona. Pronounce his last name, Daniel Penalona.
The New York officer. Yeah, I'm not going to do any better than you did.
Yeah. So I mean, you just Pantaleo. We just have so many things that can be done, and it just seems like under Democrats and Republicans, nothing has been done.
Here's a really big complaint I have about Democrats. Is that like Democrats, to me, almost put too much faith in institutions, rules, and bureaucracies. It's like, oh, we need like a better we need a better rule. We need a better rule. And sometimes you got to look up and say, wait a minute, like, we actually just need to do the thing, whatever the thing is. And it's one reason why to me,
exactly.
Like, we don't have the right approach towards police brutality, because we have this half-hearted Department of Justice oversight that, like you said, takes years, is only available in certain cases. It isn't even going after individuals. It has to be essentially like departmental policies and whatnot. And it's one reason why people are fed up. Like, you look around and being like, all right, who the hell has responsibility for this? And you have a system where it's, it's like, well, everyone's just looking around being like, I don't know who's responsible for this. And then that's why people are so pissed off.
Yeah, I think people, and Fannie Lou Hamer said it best, people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And we've gone and we've sent many of the same elected officials back year after year after year after year, and nothing's changed. And, we have one of the most, I can't leave this show. I know we're getting near the end, but I can't leave this show without telling people, we got to participate in the census. I know that the election coming up, I totally
agree with you. It seems wonky, but the census is freaking vital. I know. It sounds so like,
I wish we could kind of get near the end on something different, but the census is literally how power is distributed in this country. It's one of the most important things that we have. I've got an
idea, man. You and I should like rebrand the census. It's too late for this one, but maybe the next one, instead of calling it the census.
Oh yeah. The marketing on the census is horrible. In every 10 years, it doesn't get any better, but we have to digitize and rebrand the census. I mean, it's just so much to do. And we don't have a lot of time to fix it either, Andrew. That's the thing.
No, I mean, the country is literally on fire right now. And
aren't you kind of glad, though, in retrospect, that you're not the next president? Because think about the mess you're going to have to clean up. Think about after, it's kind of like you're the, for example, you're the general manager after Bobby Cox, or you're the quarterback after Brett Favre, or you're the coach after Dean Smith, right? That's not what you want to do, because the expectation level for you is going to be, maybe that's a horrible example because he's doing such a poor job, but it's going to be a huge mess. It's going to be a really, really big job for somebody, and it's going to be really tough.
I mean, I'd love to be coming in as president because, there's just so much to do. But I'm with you that we're coming from like a very, very deep dark hole, and like the hole is claiming people. I mean, it's claiming lives, and I understand when people look at this and being like I feel I have no recourse but to march on the streets, break curfew, whatever the heck, and scream at the top of my lungs, or worse, because we have this inhuman system that's just been grinding people up, and it's been grinding people of color up in like the most gruesome, inhuman way possible. Yeah. And when you see this happen, you look up and say, like, what choices have you left me at this point? It's like my political system seems completely unresponsive. You have, I said something that's like pretending it's working is not working, and one of the things that like a lot of Democrats do is just like come and say, it's like, hey, no, things will be all right if you like, do this and do that for us, like, get me into office or whatever. And it's like, actually, I have the suspicion that even if you were in office, like fuck all would change.
It won't change. Yeah, exactly. Because we're not. We need more radical revolutionaries, Andrew, and that's what UBI is, and that's what you are, and that's what I'm trying to be.
Well,
so.
you're like, I hope you take this in a positive way, but it's like you're like me in that you're like a revolutionary of like the heart or the spirit, and one of the things that I worry about, which I again completely get, is that people are looking up and saying like, like the empathy. Like, why should I have empathy for people who do not have empathy for me and mine? Or like the trust has just been lost, and it's very hard to reclaim trust. You know what I mean? Like if it's been broken down over, we all know that in relationships too. It's like if you're like, if someone breaks your trust, like you're just like, well, like that's that, and that's what's happened with way too many Americans. Yeah, like the goal has to be to try and reconstitute trust in like a new set of people, institutions, leaders. Oh, look at that. Is that Stokely? I'm guessing.
This is Stokely. We tried to keep him quiet for as long as possible, but he always finds a camera. I don't know why he likes the camera so much. Maybe he got that from his daddy.
Well, he looks good. He's a natural, just like his daddy. And I have to say, on like a personal level, man, I can't imagine what it's like to be the son of civil rights leaders and icons who, marched with Dr. King and Stokely Carmichael and like everyone else. I mean, you've obviously inherited it like through action. You were like the youngest state legislator and everything else.
For me, though, it's living a life that's purposeful, that's intentional. It's about being a change agent, being part of something larger than yourself. And, one of the things I always tell people, man, I can't be free if we're not all free. And you're always on this journey to improve the plight and condition of those around you. And that's what I try to do. I mean, and every step that I take and people are critical sometimes. If I make a misstep, that's fine. But just like you, my heart's always in the right place, I think. And I'm always trying to make a more perfect
Well, we all
union.
just saw it, man. I mean, you're fighting for little Stokely. You're fighting for the future of your family and your community. We need you more than ever, Bakari. I'm so glad we've gotten to know each other. And congratulations on the book. Like being a first-time author is a feeling.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you're like, you're bearing it all. Here I am. So I'm literally an open book now, and I just have to thank you for allowing me to use this platform. You have a huge platform, and I'm grateful. And, I hope people give My Vanishing Country a chance, especially during this time, so we can have that understanding and we can begin to have these conversations. The most difficult conversation in this country to have is one on race. But as you see, like you and I sat here for an hour and had a conversation, but we talked about solutions too, which is necessary during this time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have to get the solutions out there front and center so that the energy and the grief and the anger leads to a better place. I'm
more than grateful for you and your team and the Yang Gang. I love the Yang Gang. They're everywhere. And Jermaine Johnson in South Carolina, trying to get him over this hump too. So I hope more people run for office.
Yes, you said they. You sure it's not we? Like we the Yang Gang?
we. I'm official now. All I need is a little hat. I need a hat, or I'm gonna add a hat to my Avi on Twitter for sure.
Freaking man, we'll send you the real life hat. But yeah, like if you got the blue cap on, that would be tremendous. You would make us smarter, better, more empathetic.
That means a lot. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you. All the best to you and your family, man.